We are very fortunate to have a great partnership with the Urban Land Institute. They, as we said, have been involved since the very beginning with 10 at the Top and its creation. And Heather Foley, who is the state president, is here in the back. And we appreciate all that Heather has done to help organize today's event and be part of this. So thank you, Heather, and we really appreciate it. And the connection between Top and the Urban Land Institute is very strong, and one of the great examples of that is their state chairperson is also a member of our board, has been a vice chair at Top. So pleased to recognize Phil Hughes to do a brief introduction of our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Heather. Heather's an incredible resource for the Urban Land Institute. And my name is Phil Hughes. I'm a born and raised upstate native. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with Ed recently and over the past several years as part of the Urban Land Institute. If you're not familiar with the Institute, it's almost 35,000 members from around the world. It was started probably mid-century, last century, to help facilitate better development, mainly in research and education. It's member-driven. People try to share the benefits of what they've learned that's smart and share the benefits of what they've learned that were mistakes. So we come together in a way that I think that we are very, very easily identified with 10 at the Top. There are two things that sort of cross lines easily that every one of you in here have. You have love and you have respect of change. You love your community. Whatever you do, I guarantee you will be taking your time here today if you didn't love and want to learn more so that you can help your community. And you know your community is going to change. And Ed has traveled around the world. He's been in the Army. He's gone to law school. He's got his undergrad degree in urban studies. He's taught. He's been a planner. He saved 5 million acres of scenic areas. He started something to help sell more scenic areas. Ed's done so many things to see how things change around the world, that through his association as a senior fellow at Urban Land Institute, we have the privilege of having here today to share better insight so we can take what he's done, what he's learned, all the cumulative information he has, and take it back to our communities. I'm pleased to be able to sponsor the Elevate Upstate Awards. I want to continue to do that because even at any size community, planting that seed always starts somewhere. Dean's done a fantastic job with 10 at the Top and all the board members helping him. We're going to continue to work at it. This is a great crowd. And with that, let's give Ed a great warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here in the Upstate. I always love coming to the Upstate, one of my favorite parts of the world. I'm humbled by his introduction. I'm glad he didn't read the entire thing. You know, I never realized how perilous introductions could be until the first time my wife showed up at one of my talks. And I was like really thrilled to have my wife there. And I went up to her after and said, "Honey, what'd you think?" And she said, "Well, that was just fine, but I want to talk about that introduction. It was just ridiculous." She said, "The only thing they didn't say about you is they didn't say you were a model husband, now did they?" And I said, "No, but that's a great idea. Maybe I'll add that to my bio." And she said, "Go home and look up the definition in the dictionary. If you look up the definition of model, it's a small replica of the real thing." So anyway, you know, it's great to be here, as I said, in the Upstate and in South Carolina, and we've heard a couple of very thoughtful and interesting presentations about things going on in other parts of South Carolina. And you know, I've always thought about this as a great state with great people, great history, great traditions. But like every other state in America, you are facing lots of changes. Phil just touched on that. And you know, we've always faced changes in America and around the world, but what's really different today is the pace of change. This world is changing incredibly rapidly in many, many ways. And another thing we heard about today is how people oftentimes don't like change, particularly, I think, in my experience, people in small towns and rural communities really have a real hard time with change. But we've also heard that there's really only two kinds of change in the world we live in today. There's planned change and unplanned change. I mean, you can prepare for change, anticipate change, you can direct and manage change, or you can just let it happen. And if you just let it happen, I guarantee you it will destroy every single thing that you love about the place that you live. You know, South Carolina and the upstate can grow without destroying the things that people love. And we're going to talk a little bit about today about some of the ways to do that. But it begins with recognizing that change is indeed inevitable. You know, as Abraham Lincoln used to say, that the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. Or as Jack Welch used to say, you know, if you don't shape the future, someone else will shape it for you. And so really having a plan for the future is pretty important. And that's why a group like 10 at the Top, I believe, is so important. So what are some of the changes that are occurring? Of course, you are familiar with almost all of these. The national and global economy is changing, demographics, technology, consumer attitudes and market trends, healthcare, energy sources and prices. The weather is changing. Has anybody noticed? You know, all over the world, things are getting hotter, drier, wetter, depending on where you are. Today, last week, there was an announcement by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that we just went through the hottest year in the history of the planet Earth. We've never recorded a hotter year. We say, well, it wasn't so hot here, but it's a big planet, ladies and gentlemen. Things are going on all over the place. Let's talk about the economy for a second. Yes, manufacturing is down. We heard about Pendleton and the loss of mill jobs. But for business and professional services are up. Education and healthcare are up. And today, in 60 of the 100 biggest cities in America, the largest employer is a university or a hospital. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. It was a steel town. You know, U.S. Steel is all gone. The biggest employer in Alabama today is the University of Alabama Medical Center. 17 hospitals employing 100,000 people in downtown Birmingham. So yes, the world is changing. You know, some of you may have heard of Richard Florey. He has a well-known book called The Creative Class. He has a new book out called The Great Reset, and it's about the impact of the recession on the American economy. And what he says is how we live, work, shop, and get around is going to change. And communities that embrace the future will prosper. Those that do not will decline. And one of the things we're already noticing is there's a big sort going on in the United States, a big sort. When I graduated from college, you'd have a recruiter come to your university. You'd interview with the recruiter. Then you might move to wherever they offered you a job. Today it's very different. Young people today figure out where they want to live. They move to that city and then they look for a job. Today young people are clustering in major metropolitan areas, in certain cool small cities and towns. They are no longer evenly distributed throughout the United States based on population density. Just to give you an example, in the Washington, D.C. area, 47% of everyone has a college degree or higher. But in West Virginia, it's only 17%. Now, West Virginia is losing population in all but one county, which happens to be a suburb of Washington. There's a big sort going on, and we're in a global competition to attract and retain talented people. And let's talk about how the economic development paradigm has changed. When I was growing up, it was all about cheap land and cheap labor, low-cost positioning, and shotgun recruitment. In Alabama, our rural economic development strategy was, let's just widen all the highways. And then we lined the highways with a bunch of junk. That was our plan. But today, it is no longer about low-cost positioning. It's about high-value positioning. It's not about shotgun recruitment. It's about laser recruitment. It's not about cheap labor. It's about highly trained talent. It's not about what you don't have. It's about what you do have. It's what we call asset-based economic development, something that the 10 at the Top has been focusing on. And you know, quality of life really didn't matter in the past, but it is critically important today. And I would suggest to you that the most important infrastructure investment today is not roads, it is education. Education. Let's think about business recruitment for a second. You know, yes, every single American community is in a competition to attract a relative handful of plants, factories, or distribution centers that we open to do anything anymore in America. And most communities are not going to be successful in that competition. And you know, another thing we had is we had this idea for many years that economic development was always about the one big thing. So let's talk about convention centers. You know, for years in America, we had an arms race to build the biggest convention center. And once again, most communities will never win that arms race. And then it was festival marketplaces, which worked fine in Baltimore and in Boston, but did you know that there were 19 cities that opened festival marketplaces that went bankrupt? Like in downtown Toledo or downtown Richmond or Jacksonville or Norfolk. You know, they thought it was the copycat logic. Well, it worked in Boston, it has to work here. Instead of really thinking about what might work in your community and in your region. And then it was aquariums. Everybody said they had to have an aquarium, even in a city like Camden, New Jersey, that said if we could just spend $100 million building an aquarium featuring the fish of New Jersey, that we could save Camden. Well, they did build that aquarium. There's a picture of it. It's a fantastic aquarium, but did it save Camden? No, it did not. Because successful economic development, ladies and gentlemen, is rarely about the one big thing. It's usually about lots of smaller things working synergistically together off of a plan that makes sense for you and your community. And you know, it's really all about choices. You know, do we want to spend all our time trying to recruit new industry, or do we want to try to grow the industries that we already have? Thinking about the clusters of things that already have in this industry. How do you build on those things? You know, and then let's talk about demographics. Yes, we are getting older, younger, more diverse. You know, somebody's turning 65 every 10 seconds in America. That's going to happen for the next 20 years. You know, what's the fastest growing form of household in the United States? It's a single person living by themselves. A single person living by themselves. The vast majority of all American households have no school-age children. Have no school-age children. People like me, empty nesters, you know, retirees, unrelated singles living together, young professionals, etc., on and on and on. But yet we build housing in America for about 40 years, like every single family was the Waltons. The mom, the dad, the 2 kids, and the dog. And let's talk about the largest generation in American history, the current generation of young people. It turns out they're getting married later or not at all. They're postponing home ownership. They're driving less and they own fewer cars. As I said before, they're also clustering in major metropolitan areas and cool towns. They like to be in the center of things. They love walkable neighborhoods. They like it when they get around with options and choices, not just with a car. So, you know, all of those things are becoming, you know, socially adept at things like social media. We heard about Facebook earlier, you know, ordering things online, for example. And then let's talk about technology. The death of distance. You can run a business anywhere in the world today. So if you can't differentiate the upstate in your community from any other community, you simply will have no competitive advantage. Let me give you an example of how the economic development paradigm has changed. Some of you may have heard of Foster Friess. He was Rick Santorum's #1 campaign contributor in the last presidential election. He's a major contributor in the current election to various people. He runs something called the Brandywine Investment Group. It's a family of mutual funds. And for about 40 years, this company was headquartered in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. That is a busy suburb of Philadelphia. But Foster Friess likes to fly fish. And so every summer he would fly out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming to go fly fishing. And then one day he is stuck in traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway outside of Philadelphia, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes on in his mind, and he says, you know, hey, I can run a mutual fund anywhere in the world. He picks up his entire company and he moves it into downtown Jackson, Wyoming. That is the largest private sector employer in that community today. Why is he there? Access to outdoor recreation. Who would have thought that that was an economic development driver? In fact, Montana State University did a 5-year study of every business relocation to the 3 Montana counties that abut Yellowstone National Park. They asked people, why did you move here? Whether it was a professional or manufacturing, what it was. #1 reason, the beauty of the region. #2 was a good place to raise a family. #3, access to outdoor recreation. But if you'd gone to the Bozeman County Commissioners 20 years ago and suggested that they do anything to preserve the beautiful beauty of the region, like, for example, to pass a sign ordinance, they would have told you that was bad for business. But it turns out it's just the opposite. Quality of life is critically important in the world we live in today. Let's talk about consumer attitudes. This is a front page story from USA Today, which is about the simple fact that the average amount of time that people, especially young people, spend in enclosed malls and in strip shopping centers has been going down for years. People go to buy what they want and they leave. Today, young people don't go to the mall to hang anymore. They go to the restaurants. They go to coffee shops. They're hanging out with their friends online. And, you know, it's not surprising then that we haven't built a single new mall in the United States since 2006, not one. And we've closed 15% of them. And 30% of the rest are being turned inside out, having housing put on top. You know, and yes, the biggest, most successful malls, well, they're doing fine, like the Tyson's Corner Mall. But, you know, 7 of the regional malls that existed in the greater Washington area where I live have closed since I moved there. They're all being replaced, like the White Flint Mall, with 22 square blocks of mixed-use development, creating a neighborhood where we used to have a giant parking lot. You know, and the old one-size-fits-all formula simply doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work for communities. It doesn't work for development. It doesn't work really for anything. It all starts, as Jennifer said to you, by really inventorying your assets, looking at what you have and then building and enhancing on those things. So I want to touch on 4 key drivers of economic success today. One I've already touched on, talent. How do you attract and retain talented people to your community? 2, innovation. How do you generate new ideas and turn those ideas into commercial realities? The biggest recipient of federal research dollars in the United States is Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Number 2 is Stanford University. But now think about those 2 universities. Stanford has figured out how to commercialize the research coming out of the university, and they have turned into something we know as the Silicon Valley, the largest source of, you know, venture capital in the world, the largest source of entrepreneurs in the world. On the other hand, Johns Hopkins University focused all their research inwardly, focused on academic scholarship. They didn't engage with the community outside of them. That's one of the reasons why Baltimore is still a very challenged city, because their biggest anchor institution didn't really engage with the surrounding community. And what about connectivity? Yes, connectivity, we know about, interstate connectivity, road connectivity, rail connectivity, but today it's about making it easy for people and ideas to connect. You know, Richard Florida says that low-density sprawl is ill-suited to a post-industrial economy, that every era or epoch of American history has had its own spatial fix. So in the agrarian era, it was 40 acres and a mule, and in the consumer and industrial era, it was sprawl. But in the post-industrial area, it is our towns, and it is our cities, and it is our downtowns, places where people and ideas can easily connect. And the last thing I want to touch on is distinctiveness. What are the unique characteristics of your community that set you apart? You know, sustainable communities are distinctive communities. Now, some of you laugh when you see that slogan, "Keep Austin Weird." I was in Austin too long ago, and they're very proud of that slogan because it's not about really the weirdness of the city. It's about keeping them different, unusual, unique, keeping them on the cutting edge. That is the fastest growing city in America today, partly because they have branded themselves as a place that is a special place to be. What is your brand that makes people want to come here, stay here, invest here, etc.? You know, even the World Bank has a new publication out called The Economics of Uniqueness, and they make this point over in many different ways. If you can't differentiate yourself, you'll simply have no competitive advantage. Or put another way, sameness is a minus in the world we live in. It is not a plus. So, you know, think about the very definition of the word distinctive. And what are some of the synonyms for it? Unconventional, surprising, unusual, out of the ordinary, unorthodox. Would you rather have a description like that or just be conventional, standard, usual, regular, ordinary? Which one gives you a greater edge in the world, the changing world that we live in today? Community character matters, ladies and gentlemen. As Mark Twain used to say, we take stock of a city like we take stock of a man, but clothes or appearance are the externals by which we judge. Let me ask you this question. Which would you rather have? You know, would you rather have the character of the upstate shaping the new growth, or would you rather have the new growth shaping the character of the upstate? How you answer that question will determine 20 years from now what kind of region you have and what kind of communities that you have. Let's talk about a community's front door, its gateway. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important and a bad first impression is hard to change. You think you'd rather visit the town of Franklin, Tennessee? Or would you rather go to the town of Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks more like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one looks more like a community that you would rather spend time or money in? If you don't remember anything else I say this afternoon, remember this. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, where to retire, based on what our communities look like. What they look like. Richard Florida puts it this way. He says, how people think of a place is less tangible but more important than almost anything else. So let's talk about tourism, for example. You know, tourism's kind of important. It is the biggest industry in the world. It is the first, second, or third largest industry in every single American state. And you know, this is this is the official travel guide for the state of Oregon. Check out their slogan: Oregon, things look different here. Can you imagine a state travel brochure that said something like, South Carolina, things look the same here? Well, of course not. Because what is tourism? Tourism is about visiting places that are different, unusual, and unique. The more any South Carolina community comes to look just like every place else, the less reason there is to go there. On the other hand, the more a community does to enhance its uniqueness, whether that's architectural, historical, natural, artistic, cultural, whatever, the more people want to go there because that's exactly what tourism is. If every place was just like every place else, there'd simply be no reason to go any place. But, you know, how does that affect, traditional jobs? Well, in the old economy, it was about products and costs and markets. But in the new economy, it's about knowledge and value and place. Place. You know, the home builders put it this way. They say the place is becoming more important than the product. And by that they mean a number of things. They talk about what's going on outside of a home is now becoming more important than what's going on inside of a home. They tell us that the character of neighborhoods is more important than the size of lots. In fact, the home builders did a study trying to figure out, well, what was it that would add value to a home more than any other thing? Was it the type of appliances, the big size of the garage, the number of rooms? What was it? Here's what they found. They found, quote, the surrounding environment is the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home, the surrounding environment. They went on to quote, say, quote, a mountain vista or proximity to park, water, or green space affects the value of a home more than the size of the house, the number of rooms, the type of appliances, or even the presence of a swimming pool. The surrounding environment is the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home. You know, I spend a lot of time on airplanes, and so I'm always, opening up the airline magazines, and they're always filled with these economic development ads. And I pulled one out of a Frontier Airlines magazine a few weeks ago. I was on my way to Denver and had an ad for Bend, Oregon. And it was put out by their economic development. And this is a quote from that thing. But what was interesting was what they talked about in this ad was they talked about their 12 brew pubs. They talked about their walkable downtown. They talked about their 57 miles of bike trail. They talked about the fact you could go fly fishing in the morning and snow skiing in the afternoon. They did not talk about low taxes and regulatory relief. Not that those things are unimportant, but once again, quality of life is surpassing traditional ways that we thought about economic development. So some of you know about the Knight Ridder newspaper chain. I mean, like many, print media chains, it has suffered in recent years, but they founded a foundation some years ago called the Knight Foundation. And 4 years ago, they did one of the most comprehensive studies ever performed in the United States called the Soul of the Community Study. And what they found was that communities with the highest levels of attachment to place also had the strongest economies. So what is it that attaches people to place? Well, they found that it was three things primarily. Number one was social offerings. In other words, places to meet and socialize with other people. Number two, it was how welcoming a community was to newcomers. Openness. I was in another small southern city not too long ago, and somebody said to me, we're very welcoming to people who aren't different. Well, the communities that will be the most successful communities going forward will be the communities that are welcoming to all people. Diversity is one of our greatest strengths. And communities that embrace that diversity and open their arms to the world will be the most successful communities in the future. Those that close their doors will not. And they finally went on to say that the third most important thing that attaches people to community is community aesthetics, what it looks like once again. So, I have a friend, Doug Kelbaugh, who used to be the dean at the University of Michigan School of Architecture. He put it this way, he says, if a building, a landscape, or a city is not beautiful, it will not be loved. And if it is not loved, it won't be maintained and improved. In short, it won't be sustained. If you look up the definition of sustainable in the dictionary, you'll find that it means enduring. Enduring. A sustainable community, ladies and gentlemen, is simply a place of enduring value. And it's those places that we love the most, the places of enduring value. So, as I said before, the unique characteristics of a place may be the only truly defensible source of competitive advantage for communities today. One of the things I loved with Mayor Crenshaw's talk about Pendleton was, about their square, about their mills, about you building on those assets that they already have. So what are some of the dimensions of uniqueness that folks in the upstate could be thinking about? Well, we're in one of them right now. It's an anchor institution, South Carolina upstate. And anchor institutions, are large institutions like hospitals or universities, and they are proven economic engines. I mean, just think about, the entire orbit of Clemson University, or think about Virginia Tech in a very rural part of the state of Virginia. It is the economic engine of Southwest Virginia. And the reach of those universities goes way beyond the immediate town that they're located in. Anchor institutions, one key to community uniqueness and that you can grow on. A vital urban core. Notice there's this magazine here called Southern Business and Development, and it used to be a magazine that was put out for basically industrial park developers, and their headline was, when site searching the South, make sure you inspect the community's downtown first. Why would an industrial park developer care about a downtown? Well, I'll tell you why, because we figured out all over the United States, if you don't have a healthy downtown, you simply don't have a healthy town. The apple rots from the inside out. It's kind of hard to be a suburb of nothing. And so, having a healthy core plays a decisive role in economic vitality and vibrancy. And it's in these downtowns that are a critical point and nerve center for regions and communities. And it is this place where people and ideas can most easily connect. So when you invest in your downtown, you are indeed investing in the entire community. And there are numerous studies now that show that, for years we were moving everything out of our downtowns. Now it's starting to go the other way. This is a new study, just came out about a month or two ago, documents 500 American companies that have moved from, outside of downtowns back into downtowns in the past 5 years. 247 of these communities moved from industrial office parks back into downtown. Give you an example, the Marriott Corporation has been headquarters for about 40 years in an industrial, basically an office park, a nice office park off the Washington Beltway. They announced about 2 months ago they're moving back into the city. And when you ask these people why are they moving, and this is just a handful of some of the companies, so when they ask why are you moving, I'm going to come back to that, here's what they tell you. Well, we're moving to attract and retain talented workers. We're moving to build brand identity. We're moving to support collaborative cooperation. You know, a few weeks ago, I went out to Seattle and they gave us a tour of the new Amazon World Headquarters there, which is in downtown Seattle. It's in the neighborhood called Lake Union neighborhood. And they used to be scattered all over the Seattle area. And you know, one of the people from Amazon talked to us and said, you know, so many of our old workplaces, you basically had to drive there to get to work. He said, you know, you can drive here now, but you can also take a bus, you can take a train, you can take a boat, you can ride your bike, you can take a skateboard, or you can walk. And guess what? When people get off work, they walk across the street, and there's the restaurant they like to go to, or the coffee shop in the middle of the day. And the kind of people who work for the Amazons of the world like to be in the center of it all, which is why companies like this are relocating. I want to suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the future belongs to main streets. It belongs to town centers. It belongs to mixed-use development. And that strip development is development for the last century. And let's talk about why that is. Well, first of all, everything we were building for 40 years was out there on the highway. Okay? And we went from 4 square feet of retail space per person in the United States to almost 40 square feet of retail space. And if the recession didn't teach us anything else, it taught us we were overstored in suburban retail. And what's interesting is we were building retail space in America for about 20 years, 5 times faster than retail sales. And of course, what that meant was when you opened this new strip center, it would cannibalize the one down the road. And you open the Walmart, shut down the Ames or the local hardware store or whatever it happened to be. But retail is rediscovering our cities and our downtowns. And there's one big reason for that, because in our cities and in our towns is the only place left with more spending power than stores. Okay, so they're throwing out all their old rules. When I first moved to Washington, D.C., we had 2 inner city grocery stores. They were both Safeways. We called one the Soviet Safeway because it didn't have any food and you had to wait in line to get little things. The other was in Georgetown where I went to school, and we called that the Social Safeway because of the hot dating scene that occurred there. Did you know that we now have 32 new urban grocery stores in Washington? And they're all in buildings like the one you see in the upper left-hand corner. That's a Safeway with 6 floors of housing and office on top. Virtually every single one of our Newsroom grocery stores is in a setting like that. People would have said you could have never done that. Small footprint stores. That's a Target in a 5-story building in downtown Stamford, Connecticut. Or how about parking on the roof of a Walmart? Who would have thought that that was possible? Here's the new Walmart in downtown Washington, D.C. It's in a 5-story building. It has 300 apartments above the Walmart. There's a swimming pool on the roof. There's a fitness center in the glassed-in area above the escalator onto the floor of the Walmart. Where is the parking? The parking is underneath the building. And by the way, that Walmart, if you see in the front, actually has real windows that let in real sunlight onto the floor of the Walmart. That is the first in America, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, this is now happening all over America. They just built a new Walmart in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, with no parking in front of the building. The parking is all underneath the building. This is going on all over America. How about this Target in Minneapolis? Or how about this Home Depot in New York? And by the way, somebody said to me about this Home Depot, well, how do you get your lumber home? And of course, the answer is they deliver. Well, there's a concept. And it's happening in small towns as well. There's a new urban outfitter in Ithaca, New York, where I was about 2 weeks ago. Or here's a new CVS in Baldwin Park, Florida. And you say, well, where's the drive-through? Well, they don't have a drive-through, but they will deliver your prescription by bicycle to your house. So it's all going back to the way, we had a model for development in America for 250 years, and we called it a town. And then we just forgot about it. But we're going back to that model, ladies and gentlemen. And let me show you an example. This is kind of, the way the world is changing. So I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, this summer, and I was driving down the airport's up near Bentonville, and I'm coming down the interstate, and I get off the interstate, and I see this Waffle House out by the highway, and I didn't pay any attention to that Waffle House, because there's Waffle Houses all over America out by the highway. And then I get into downtown Fayetteville, and I see another Waffle House, and it has 3 floors of housing on top of the Waffle House. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I had never seen a Waffle House with housing on top before. So I decided to run over, go looking for the Fayetteville City Hall, and I go in there and I find the planning department, and I run in and I introduce myself to the director of planning for Fayetteville. It turns out they've already done a study on that. Turns out the downtown Waffle House is outperforming the Waffle House out on the highway. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it is producing more taxes per acre, more jobs per acre. It has more residents per acre. 52 people live upstairs. How many people live above the Waffle House out by the highway? Well, of course, no one. And by the way, if you're eating a lot of waffles, you probably need a walk after that. So it actually turns out to be kind of good for our health as well, because people will, could walk to the Waffle House in downtown Fayetteville. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why the future belongs to mixed-use development, because it is outperforming traditional segregated drive everywhere for everything kind of development. It is more difficult to build, it is more complicated, but it is the future. So yes, we can go from spread out, drive only, single-use Best Buys to places like this. That's a Best Buy with housing on top. And I know everybody doesn't want to sleep upstairs and shop downstairs, but some of the people do like that. Some of the 75% of American households without school-aged children. And these are the kind of places we can put on the low-density commercial strips that everybody hates. Because, it's kind of like Joni Mitchell used to sing that song about, tear up paradise and put in a parking lot. Well, we can now start tearing up the parking lots and putting paradise back in. And you say, well, I couldn't do that in my small town. Well, maybe you could do something like this. This is a brand new Dairy Queen in the small town of Herndon, Virginia, and has a dentist office upstairs. How appropriate. And who'd you rather live next door to anyway? A house full of out-of-control teenagers or a dentist office? Which one would have more impact on your quiet enjoyment of your home? And then there's, of course, this thing in the real estate world we call the place-making dividend. And what does that mean? It simply means that people stay longer, come back more often, and spend more money in places that attract their affection. Places that attract their affection. Just a word about historic resources. What is the value of the historic buildings of the upstate? Well, first and foremost, these are the places that physically connect us to the past. These are the places that tell us who we are and where we came from. I know many of you have been to visit Tom Wolfe's home in Asheville, but you can't go to his original home because here it is in this parking lot. As Daniel Webster used to say, the man who feels no sentiment or veneration for the memory of his forefathers is himself unworthy of kindred regard and remembrance. At its essence, saving the historic buildings of South Carolina is about saving the heart and soul of South Carolina. But it's also incredibly important for your economic well-being as well. Let me give you a couple of examples. This used to be the fire station, a small town in southern Wisconsin, Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin. It became obsolete as a fire station. It got turned into a pizza parlor. But like so many small towns in America, it was a town going downhill. So they brought in something called the Main Street Program, a very powerful tool for economic revitalization in small town America. They've restored the facade of that building, physically connecting them to the roots in the past. But guess what else happened? Sales of pizza almost doubled, and it sustained that over a multi-year period. So let me give you a couple of nationally famous examples. Welcome to New Orleans. Welcome to St. Louis Square, Jackson Square. I spent a lot of time in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I was part of the team of engineers and architects and planners brought down to try to put together a redevelopment plan for the city. And of course, the city didn't just want a physical plan, they wanted an economic redevelopment plan. And of course, all the consultants said, tell us what your biggest industries are. Is it seafood? Is it sugar? Is it oil? Is it chemical? They said, no, it's none of those things. The single biggest industry in all of Louisiana is the tourism industry. And what is the engine of that industry? Well, it is the French Quarter. But did you know that for about 40 years, the state of Louisiana Department of Transportation wanted to put a freeway through the French Quarter? This, ladies and gentlemen, is more valuable and more important than any plant, factory, or distribution center in the entire state of Louisiana. But we just didn't appreciate that. Well, let's head over to Texas and go to San Antonio and visit the San Antonio Riverwalk, the #1 destination in all of Texas. It's the basis of that city's multi-billion-dollar a year annual tourism industry, and it is the single defining characteristic of San Antonio. What most people don't know, however, is that at one point in the past, the city of San Antonio thought so little of that small river, they actually wanted to put it underground into a culvert. Today, it has been so successful that even cities like Oklahoma City without rivers go to San Antonio and then go back and dig a ditch to fill in with water so they can have a San Antonio River walk. How about the Pike Place Farmers Market in Seattle, the #1 destination in Washington? And they were going to tear it down. A couple of people in the city council were saying, well, we got to have more downtown parking. Like, parking for what? You can have all the parking in the world. If there's nothing to do, no one's ever going to want to go there. How about the, Art Deco Historic District in South Miami Beach, the largest collection of Art Deco buildings in America? They were all going to be torn down. Now it's one of the greatest urban places in all of North America. Or how about the Camden Yards Baseball Stadium? The most influential sports stadium ever built in North America. Not just because it was a new stadium, because it did the best job of integrating new construction with the historic buildings in the neighborhood that surrounded that site. It became the model for all baseball stadium development. As author Fromer said, among cities and towns with no particular recreational appeal, those that preserve their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourists simply won't go to a city or town that has lost its soul. Wait, a quick word about parks. Great parks shape great cities, and great cities shape great parks. And great parks increase the value of adjacent land. Where's the most valuable land in all of New York State? Well, there it is. It's the land next to Central Park. And so, we're starting to realize that green space is something that needs to go along with new development. And parks can revitalize our deteriorated inner city neighborhoods. This is the Over the Rhine district in Cincinnati, and this park brought that neighborhood back to life. Arts and culture, something you have a lot of here. Museums, theaters, concert halls, art galleries, festivals. The new sculpture park in downtown Des Moines has attracted 4 new corporations to put their headquarters right adjacent to it. Paducah, Kentucky has brought an entire neighborhood back to life by offering artists houses for $1 so that they'd have a place that they could work and live and show their art, to become one of the leading artist destinations in the United States. Restaurants and food. Food can be an economic development driver. There's a farmer's market in the ferry terminal in San Francisco today. It's one of the highest grossing projects in the United States. Or how about Union Market, a derelict neighborhood in the worst, toughest neighborhood in D.C., now has transformed the neighborhood, employs 1,500 people, has 100 new businesses. Food. I love this line, growing your own food is like printing your own money. And I'm getting developers calling me every week now to talk about how to put farms in the middle of their developments. And buying local neighborhoods versus, chain stores. Turns out $1 spent in a local store will recirculate through your community at a rate 2 to 3 times faster than dollars spent other places. So I want to end by just sharing what I call my secrets of successful communities. I've been in this business for a very long time, and I've come to some conclusions about why, some communities are very successful and so many others are not. And number one, it always starts with a vision for the future. And having grown up in the South, I can tell you that I know lots of people who tell me I'm against planning. And I always say to them, well, then you tell me the name of any successful organization, institution, corporation, or community that doesn't plan for the future. Failing to plan simply means planning to fail. As the book of Proverbs says, without vision, the people will perish. And successful visions always begin by inventorying your assets, or what some people might call assessing your community. And then communities build all their plans, whether it's an economic development plan, a land use plan, a tourism plan, whatever, around the enhancement of their existing assets. Successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't say I'm against regulation. We need regulations that prevent bad things from happening. They set a minimum standard of conduct, but you got to use carrots, not just sticks. Successful communities pick and choose among development proposals. Do you know what the biggest impediment to better development in small towns in the South has been for the last 35 years? I'll tell you what it is. It's a fear of saying no to anything. Well, if you're afraid to say no to anything, you will simply get the worst of everything. Communities that set no standards or low standards simply compete right to the bottom. Communities that set high standards will compete to the top, because they know if you say no to bad development, you will always get better development in its place. Successful communities cooperate with their neighbors for mutual benefit. Successful communities consider what they look like. Successful communities have strong leaders and committed citizens. Now, you know, I know that no is a very powerful word in America today, but I want to tell you a more powerful word, and that is yes. Yes, we can make the upstate a better place to live in, to look at, to work in, to visit. You know, a pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. Ladies and gentlemen, you can grow without destroying the things that people love. Thank you for your leadership in trying to make the upstate the great place that it is. Thank you so much for that.
As a former mayor, I know how challenging it can be for communities to create economic and community vibrancy, and I appreciate the great ideas and insight provided today by our speakers, Mayor Crenshaw, Ed McMahon, and Jennifer Tinsley. Thank you so much. And as we wrap up today's program, I want to call your attention to the fact that there's a schedule of events in your program so that you can catch up with what's coming up with 10 at the Top. Also, I especially want to thank Tiffany Tate and Ashley Downing and Missy Hauser, our staff for 10 at the Top, for working to make today's event successful, and all they do to help the 10 at the Top upstate region. Also, I want to thank our sponsors for this forum: Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, TD Bank, Greenville Health Systems, Community Works Carolina, the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport, International Airport, Brown Mackie College, the Rutland Institute for Ethics at Clemson University, Upstate Forever, the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors, the Riley Institute at Furman University, Upstate South Carolina Alliance, Mary Black Foundation, J.M. Smith Corporation, and the Urban Land Institute. Again, we want to thank Tom for having us today and for putting out all the chairs at his lunch hour, and for their hospitality, because there will be a reception. We hope that you will stay because it's a great networking opportunity. We have, I believe, almost 180 people here today, so you've got a lot of talking opportunities and learning opportunities. We do have a special gift today for Ed McMahon and for Jennifer. There it is. I'm sorry. And Mayor, I'll get you something special later. Yeah, Pendleton is my hometown, so I am a little bit prejudiced. Thank you all for being here today, and I hope that you will enjoy the reception and that you will follow up with our upcoming schedule of events. Thank you, and have a great evening.